Okay, so I guess if I'm going to be topical, I've got to talk about Charlottesville. Um, that's too bad. I think there's more going on in the United States that is much more impactful in people's lives. I I wish Charlottesville didn't exist as a distraction, but it's a big distraction. So I'm going to break this down into the things about it that I think are important. Okay, so first, there is this assertion that if you oppose something and you don't vehemently speak out, then you are collaborating with it. And inevitably, the comparisons will come up with the German citizens of the under Nazi Germany. Okay, so I just have to call BS there, right? There are an infinitude of things that we do not agree with, that we do not verbalize, things that we just find completely objectionable and would never think of doing ourselves. And when we see it done, feel bad about it, but are in no way collaborative in it. I would never spank my daughter. I just would not do it. It's not a question of my imagination, because I have a vivid imagination. And I'm telling you that there's just no scenario under which I'm going to spank my daughter. She's 6 years old. I've never spanked her. She will never be spanked by me. I have raised her to the point where we can reason, and I know that's people who say, oh, you can't reason with a 6-year-old, and you can't just walk in and reason with a 6-year-old. There's got to be a foundation there, and I've worked very hard to do that. Further, whenever I see someone spank their child, right, I feel a pain of repulsion, let alone the state. I mean, I was a school teacher, and I don't know how many times people would say, oh, we got to bring spanking back into the school. And I would say, no, if your 12-year-old child is so out of control and so socially unmanageable that you need a stranger to take a board and beat them into submission, then you're not doing your job as a parent. You need to get your kid ready for school and be able to accept discipline before you send them off to school. So, so there's spanking, but I'm not going to go out there and protest spanking. And whenever I find out that someone has spanked, I don't put up a sign and go marching against it. And there are just an infinitude of it, right? People who drive 42 miles an hour in a 45 mile an hour speed zone, they piss me the fuck off, right? But I'm not going to. And the fact that I don't do anything about it doesn't mean I'm collaborating with them. It's not like, well, you've enabled them to drive 42 and a 45, so therefore you are a collaborator, right? If I could get everyone to drive 48 and a 45 mile an hour speed limit, you bet your ass I would do it. Right? So the fact that I don't go out there and try to intimidate and provoke and just show my ass to every white supremacist on the planet in no way means that I favor white supremacy, right? Or even white nationalism, right? I'm not a big fan of white nationalism. I think we're moving towards a one world color, and I've done my job, right? I had a kid with a Mexican, so I'm doing my job to water down the purity level. I was a pure white guy, a little bit of Indian mixed in there. Native American Indian, but for the most part, I was 100% redneck, white. Redneck gene pool there. Chose to have a daughter with a Mexican woman. So I feel like I've done my part. Right, so that's just bullshit, right? So then the next question is, well, since we're not collaborating, we don't agree with them, do we have to be out there provoking them, right? Right? You had a group of rednecks, white nationalists, Nazis, whatever you want to call them, right? They have an indefinite number of euphemisms for them. They say, look, we're going to be in downtown, we're going to be in around this convention center in Charlottesville, Virginia. And if anybody wants to come down and start a fight, come on down. We're ready to go. So why the fuck did all these people say, yeah, let's go get that fight started? Not only that, I'll make a big sign, and so that they know that I'm here. They can't overlook me. It's just stupid, right? Yeah. I don't care what you are. I don't care what group you are that I disagree with. If your agenda is to hole up in a convention center and spout slogans, and that's the extent of it, if it doesn't involve impinging upon someone else's rights, or going on some sort of a violent escapade, or even planning a violent escapade, right? It was just a rally to show that, hey, we're white people, we're proud of it. We think we're better than all the other races. Okay, so think you're better than everybody else, right? As long as you do it in that convention center and don't bug me, right? Then great. So why can't we just leave them alone? Why can't we just say, yeah, there you go? Okay, so we decided not to leave them alone, right? So then my next question is okay, so what's the big deal? You had a group of rednecks, said, this is where we're going to be, this is what we're going to do. It's not going to affect anybody unless they decide to come down and want to make something of it. Okay? And so some people, I guess, had nothing better to do on a Friday evening than say, yeah, let's go provoke those rednecks. Okay, so some people went and provoked the rednecks. Great. They stood up for their values. They're enjoying their right to protest. Anybody with a lick of sense would have said, oh yeah, that's going to end up being violent. That's going to be a violent confrontation. And sure enough, just as the rednecks promised, like when you had people who opposed them show up, they went out and beat the hell out of them. And so we had a situation where the logical conclusion of people's choices came to fruition. How is that a big deal? How is that a surprising thing, right? Right? I was more surprised when Roy was eaten by the tiger, and he was someone who stuck his head in the tiger's mouth every night. I was like, oh wow! So eventually, yeah, even though they were trained, the tiger bit him. Yeah, so these guys aren't even trained tigers, right? They're just a bunch of weirdo nutbags who look for any excuse to get into a fight or worse with either minorities or people they consider race traitors. Yeah, how is that? So who's surprised by that? Who thought? Okay, so yeah, they've announced where they're going to be. These protesters are going to come down with their signs and shout their insults. And then the white supremacists will give in. Yeah, they'll recognize the error of their ways. They'll see the reason and the logic, and turn over a new leaf. What a bunch of idiots! If you believe that, right? If when your girlfriend said, "Hey, all of us other paralegals are going to go down and provoke these white supremacists so that we can change the world," and Heather says, "Oh yeah, I got nothing better to do on a Friday night than go provoke a bunch of violent, organized, slightly above bestial intelligence men," and then she ends up dead. Well, that just seems to me like the logical consequences of your choices, right? Why am I surprised by that? Yeah, I just don't get it. A 32-year-old white woman decides she's going to go provoke a bunch of other white men who are going to see her as a race traitor, and she winds up dead. The thing that surprises me is that there were only 3 deaths, and that all 3 were white. Yeah, I don't know how the people of color got out of there with with only the damage that was done to them. Because from my impression of white supremacists, given the length of time it took the police to respond, I would have expected a much higher body count, and I would have expected it to be skewed much heavier towards people of color, not 3 white people. So what's the big deal? Why are we even talking about this 3 days later? Okay, so we had 3 white people die, 2 of them in a helicopter crash, which is kind of weird. But we had 1 die as a product of redneck violence. In a situation where we had a bunch of rednecks, everyone knew where they were, people set out to deliberately provoke them, and they succeeded in provoking them, and we wound up with 1 person dead, a white woman dead. All right. In the same time since that occurred, since August 10th, Friday, August 10th, there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people killed by police in America. I haven't dug into the data. I would expect that of those 11, probably 6 of them at least are people of color, and probably at least 6 of them were individuals who were not armed with any sort of a firearm. Right? So that's 11 clear injustices. And of those 11 police shootings that occurred in the same period, not a single one of them will result in a conviction. Now, Charlotteville, the guy who ran the car, he will be convicted. He'll end up in prison somewhere, as he should. I'm not saying he shouldn't. But what I'm saying is we've got the systematic murder of innocent people week in and week out, most of them people of color, by law enforcement offices across the United States. And rather than protest that, right? And that's unexpected, right? No one goes out of it. So in Charlotteville, you had protesters saying, "Yeah, let's go down there and provoke a fight, see what happens." And we saw what happens, and everything was predictable. But no one walks out of there. Well, I say that very few people walk out of their house like, "I'm going to go to the movie," and well, there's a good chance I'll wind up shot by the police on the way or on the way home, right? The police death toll is just staggering. It's like week in and week out, right? And we're just now learning the magnitude of it. We're just now beginning to compile the statistics. It's always been anecdotal. And now that we finally have responsible journalism, and we are being distracted by the death of 1 white girl in a highly predictable fashion, as opposed to the 13 who were killed in the same time span, right, by police since then. There's just no sense of reason as far as, well, this is where we need to put our resources. This is where we need to focus our effort. It's just absurd. I don't see me aligning with a movement that is as ineffective as that. Okay, so here is the deal. Here is the fundamental problem, not just in Charlotteville or America, but with humanity. So, in the world, from an evolutionary standpoint, there were limited resources. There's always been limited resources. It's an ongoing problem. And the way that humans evolved to acquire more resources is through forming groups, through forming groups that they identify with. And then, if I attach myself to a group, then I can compete as a group and we can gain better access to a scarce resource than the other groups. If we're the groups that are best at it end up with the most resources. So there's a cultural evolution going on there, and because it's cultural, we can control it, right? We can decide that is maybe God's big plan, but it's a shitty plan, right? And that we are going to decide that we are all equal, that we are egalitarian, that we are not going to compete. We're not going to divide up. Now, that's really hard to do. It's just hardwired into people to attach themselves to a group and not think. And what inevitably happens, right, is some group says, well, no, I think everybody should stop thinking of themselves as a member of a group, except for my groups. I still want to be a gay man, or I still want to be an African American. Everybody else should quit identifying as their group. Everybody else should decide that they shouldn't be competing for resources as a member of a group, right? And looking for tax breaks or special protections or privileges under the law, except for my group, right? My group still should still be receiving those things, right? So I don't know how you get past that. I don't know. And the thing is, too, that it's really easy for me as a white guy to say that, because of the various groups, whatever they are, gender, sexual orientation, racial, right? As a heterosexual American white male, right? I don't wake up in the morning thinking this is my identity, right? It has to be brought to my consciousness before I think, oh yeah, I'm heterosexual, right? Someone who is not heterosexual, they don't enjoy that privilege, right? That every waking moment they are confronted with the realities, like, oh yeah, I have an orientation that people would react negatively against if it was discovered openly. Or at least not everybody, but a lot of people, right? Same thing, right? I mean, every now and then a situation will occur and I'll realize, oh yeah, I'm white. But there's no, I see the police Christmas tree in the back behind me and on traffic. I don't get anxious, unless I'm speeding, so unless I've actually done something wrong, right? But I don't think, oh my God, I'm white. Something can happen here. Or, I don't walk into a store and notice, oh, I wonder if those are security following me around because I'm white. And especially now that I'm middle-aged, right? There were things about me when I was young that you could make, but now that I'm middle-aged, so it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, we need to set aside all of our identity associations and just live as individuals and interact as individuals. And what's really ironic is that while I advocate that and strive for that, I am hugely inclined towards insensitive humor of all kinds, because I see the humor in it, but I see the humor in everything, right? That's how you have a good sense of humor, is if you look at things that are not normally humorous and you see the humor in it. So that's what needs to be done, maybe. And I think that whenever I interact with members of the younger generation, like my daughter is half Mexican, and I don't see her identifying either herself or her interactions with her peers in terms of group association. But then, 6-year-olds really young, a lot of that comes out in adolescence. I sure hope to avoid it. But, culturally, it's just a hard thing to fight. So I don't have an easy answer. These are always, that's the hard part, is they're always hard things. But I can tell you this. So, short of getting rid of group associations, which are always going to be there, religious, national, racial, gender, sexual orientation. Yeah, short of getting rid of those. When I look at the world as it is and say, okay, forget about the idealistic hopes. When I see a group that I disagree with, that I don't have to confront, that their agenda is to group up in isolation, unless they control some sort of resource that is important to society as a whole, I say let them do it, right? Like I'll give you an example. I know a little bit about Mormons. I know a little bit about the Church of Latter-day Saints, and what little I know, I think is absurd. I think it's ridiculous. But Mormons get together and they do the things they do. They have the beliefs they believe, and I disagree with it. But I'm not going to go out there and challenge it. Let them do the things they want. Orthodox Jews, same thing, right? Amish. I mean, why do we have to? Why do you have to challenge every belief that you think is wrong? Yeah, I mean, radical feminism. Now, so you compare those things, which are group associations that have wacky beliefs at best, versus the police, right? And I think something has to be done about the police, right? So while the whole thing in Charlottesville is a tragedy and unfortunate, I guess, I wish it hadn't have happened. But it was the consequence of individual choices that could have been prevented, if people just chose not to. And it's highly localized, right? That's not going to happen in Tulsa. It's not going to happen in New York, right? It's just, unless a group of white nationalists decide to hold a rally there, and then a group of Yahoo protesters decide to antagonize them. I mean, if it becomes a pattern, we'd have to do something about it. Right now, it's just a localized thing in Charlottesville. But the police murder of civilians, particularly those of color, right? That is state-sanctioned homicide, right? And I'm okay with state-sanctioned homicide, right? I believe that the death penalty is also state-sanctioned homicide, as long as it has the semblance of fairness. And the current status with the police is just beyond the pale, right? Yeah, it's never going to affect me, but it's just wrong. And I don't know how African Americans with the capacity to do the things that people like Timothy McVeigh did, or the 9/11 bombers. I don't know how we're not suffering that every week. I know that history has shown that if white men were suffering that type of injustice, there would be blood on the streets, and other than just theirs, right? I mean, Timothy McVeigh did a bad thing, but they quit killing innocent white people. They said, yeah, those white people blow up our fucking buildings, kill our kids. I guess we better stop killing them without a good reason. And it would be unfortunate if African Americans were pushed to that same length. But if I were giving advice to African Americans, that's what it would be to, Bobby Seals and the Black Panthers had it right. And you organize, resist, or you die. But that's just me. I tend to be data driven, and when I see the facts, I have to acknowledge them, even when they are distasteful. So, anyway, I don't know if this is going to change anything. I don't even know if it'll be I don't even know if it will contribute in a positive way. It's calling for black people to organize and kill a lot of innocent civilians is a pretty provocative thing. It'd be great if people ignored the facts and didn't do that. But if I'm asked what advice I would give to black people, that's what it would be. History's demonstrated it's effective in the United States.